Yeah, so last year I bought a tarp from Home Depot or Harbor Freight, one of those kind of places, a really big one, and it cost me about 120 bucks. And I then bought some culled lumber, which was cheap at the Home Depot. You know, culled lumber is the lumber that's not got little twists and checks and stuff in it. And I used that cheap lumber to build a frame to support the tarp over the boat, over my boat. And that made it through pretty much the winter. But then in the spring, it ripped. And it ripped right over the frame. So the frame didn't fail, the tarp failed. So that ended up being a failed experiment. So I was going to have my boat shrink wrapped after I winterized it by one of the local marinas. But I forgot how much that cost. But I checked with my neighbor who has it done all the time, and I decided, you know what, instead of investing I think it was going to cost me about 150 or 175 bucks to shrink wrap it, and then just end up cutting the shrink wrap off in the spring, I decided maybe I should invest in one of these Shelterlogic shelters. So I was looking online, and I found this one was actually on sale from Northern Equipment's website. And the key was it was a decent price, and it was free freight. And the free freight is a big help. So this thing weighs quite a bit, and so it has to come by motor freight, and it's not going to be the kind of thing that you're going to be able to just easily pick up and take off of the back of the truck. So when you actually have it shipped, one of the things they ask you is whether or not you need liftgate service, meaning if you don't have a loading dock that they can take this thing right off of the back of an 18-wheeler, then what ends up happening is you have to pay for a liftgate service, which is $65. And the $65 charge is basically so that the truck that they bring is going to be like a box truck with a hydraulic liftgate on the back, so they can slide it onto the liftgate and lower it down to the ground, leave it on your driveway. In my case, I waived the liftgate service, and I arranged to have the 18-wheeler, because I live on a dead-end street, so that's another no-no. I arranged to have him meet me at an alternate location right near me that is on my property, and I brought my Oliver front-end loader over there, and he pulled up with the 18-wheeler, and we slid it right off of the back of the 18-wheeler onto the front-end loader, no problem. So I lucked out there. But just keep that in mind when you're ordering this thing, that if you don't have a loading dock for them to unload it on, and if you're on a dead-end street, you're going to have to overcome those obstacles, and you may end up having to pay a little bit more. All right, so first thing I got to do is I got to build the frame for the roof. So it's a pretty straightforward roof system. Consists of these special joints at the top. There's 4 of this style, which they actually have a part number of 802794. All of the components have a number silk screened onto them. So we got 4 of these. We got 2 large tubes. So we got 4 like this, and then there's going to be 2 like this, which are the ends of the peak. There's basically 2 diameters of tubing used in this. This is the smaller diameter. This is the 10110 tubes. We need 5 of these in the peak to interconnect these pieces, and then 5 on each side, total of 15. So you basically start with something like this, and then you add on another tube, another middle section, another tube, another middle section, until you get to the end, and you put another one of those 3-post jobs over there on. There are 2 sizes of bolts, carriage bolts used in this thing, and then the nuts. And all the hardware comes in one bag. So they're telling me that I got 68 pieces of one bolt, 56 pieces of another bolt, and 124 should be nuts. Because 56 and 68 is 124. So I know these are the 2 part numbers for the bolts. I got to figure out which one's which. The reason why there's 2 different sizes of bolts used in this system is because where you've got a thin pipe coming into a joint here, you use the shorter ones. Where you have the thick pipes being joined together, you need the longer ones. So you want to make sure you don't accidentally use any of these long bolts, slightly longer bolts in here, because then you're going to find that these are too short. One way to really speed up assembly is to, instead of just using a ratchet, get a 1/4 inch socket adapter and get a 1/4 inch 7/16 inch socket and use it in a drill or an impact driver. All right, my son Mark is out here helping me now, so this should go a lot quicker. So this is what we've done so far. I built this center section, and now that he's joined me, he helped me. Well, he actually put together most of this. And the one on this side. So you're just going to make sure that when you put these on, that the short leg is going to be facing down. You want the bend going up because that forms part of the arch of the roof. Of course, these end pieces have to go where they have to go. There are 2 rights and 2 lefts. And I think that's about it. And then we noticed that the coating that they put on here to for corrosion resistance or whatever, it actually kind of makes it sometimes a little bit tricky to get inside here. I also noticed, like on these end ones, there's spatter from the welding process of welding that joint right there on the inside that they didn't clean out very well, so I had trouble getting that one in initially, but I ended up being able to work it in. You got to kind of give it a twisting motion, and consequently, as you're doing that, it scrapes off most of that finish that's on there anyways, but that's all right. So now to complete the frame, we need to put in the arch pieces that go between that piece and that piece. All right, so we're getting ready to put the center section in. There's 2 types of pipe. There's this upper part of the arch, which has a reduced diameter on each end, and then the lower part of the arch has a reduced diameter on the bottom edge, and it's flared at the top, or it's open at the top to accept that. We just went to put this together, and we couldn't get these to go in, and the reason why is because if you turn it on its side, you look at it, when they made these holes, somehow in the process they ended up flaring this hole really badly. It's all bent and deformed. This sticks way out. This pipe will not even come close to wanting to go in there, you know. And see, it should be more like that. See how that's pretty flush with the surface? So I don't know what process they used to make this hole. If I had to guess, I would guess that they drill down through the top and go right through and drill right through to the other side, and that when the drill exits on this side, it heats that metal and weakens it and pushes out. Maybe a dull drill bit, I don't know. That one's pretty bad. They're all, almost every single one of them's like that. So now I've got to go and I've got to fix every single one of these. There's a couple ways I could do it. I could grind the metal off. You know, if you're the average homeowner, you might not have an angle grinder to do that. So the temptation would be to bend this back down with a hammer. The problem is, banging on this with a hammer, you're likely to actually squash this pipe out around. As luck would have it, I went in my metal pile and I've got a piece of stock that's like a perfect diameter to fit in here. So what I can do is I can stick this in here. So I could stick this in here like this. Now, so I bend that down and now it's not, it didn't damage. That's still going to be round. I'll just flip the other end. That one looks okay. That must be what it is. Every single one of these has one good hole and one bad hole. So it's the hole on the side where the drill bit exited that's deformed. All right. Mark, go ahead and try and put that in now. All right, so Mark's putting the second one in, and what we also discovered is that on the insides of these, there's like burrs from the drilling process. They didn't deburr the inside of the hole, so you can't get these pieces into here if there's a burr in the way. And I don't have like an annular cutter or anything that's the perfect size to go in there, or a reamer, but luckily it doesn't seem like it's too bad. I got so many flat files, but I'm kind of short on round files, so it's kind of rusty, but it's working. So that's how we just cleaned up that hole so we could get that one in. Now we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 more to go. All right, so after all the bashing and deburring of the holes and everything, we finally got this part of the frame all put together. Boys were just asking me, because they had accidentally put one of these bolts facing out, they asked me whether or not they had to change it around. And you do, because you don't want this sharp end of the bolt sticking out on this outer edge, because the top of this actually wraps around this. So it's going to wrap around this, and you can imagine if that sharp bolt end was sticking out, over time it would cut into the tarp. So now we got to lift up one side and get this whole monstrosity in. So in retrospect, probably shouldn't have done it in this way. We probably should have left that in pieces and put the individual leg, the connecting parts, onto the bottoms of these, and then we could just spread them apart to get those pipes in. But we'll manage. All right, so we've got the roof frame complete. The last step we did to finish the roof was to assemble these cross truss pieces. There is one detail about these cross truss pieces. They show that on the end ones here, that the truss should be on the inside like I have it, instead of out here. But they show the carriage bolt going through this side and the nut end of the bolt out here, which would leave this little sharp piece right here sticking out on this side. And again, I know from previous ones that we've made that material gets wrapped around here, so I wanted this nice and smooth. So I didn't like that idea, so I did that one change. Otherwise, we followed the instructions. So that went together not too bad. A little bit of fussing and fighting, get some pieces in. So the next step is to get the upper leg sections on. So the next thing I need to do is I need to anchor down this frame before I could put the covers on it. And this is what they supply in the box with the kit. And for those of you who are not from the New England area and don't know it, here in New England, you can't pretty much stick anything in the ground anywhere without hitting rocks. And some of them are pretty sizable. So these are pretty useless. And quite frankly, unless you've just got like loose soil that you're drilling these into, and then the problem is if it's loose soil, you know, maybe they might pull out, I don't know. But I've already been, this isn't my first rodeo. I know that these aren't gonna work for me. They might work in a couple spots here and there, but I want something much more secure, especially at the corners. So the first one of these that I ever built and installed is still standing and hasn't blown away, and it's gone through some pretty heavy winds, and that's in part because of the extra anchoring that I think I've installed. At least I think that's why it is. So I have this old this is an old steel fence post. This is the type of fence post they would use for chicken wire, would hook on these and then be banged over. They actually have a plate to help cut into the soil and go in. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to make 2 posts out of this one. Normally that wouldn't stall like that, but I'm running it on an extension cord. The reason why I was readjusting it was because I wanted to make the cut between 2 of these, because I'm going to be able to bend that tab out of the way, and I'll have a ready-made hole already there for the little cable to go through, which is what is used to attach the leg to the actual stake. I think I made these a tad too long. I'm gonna go cut the next one shorter. So the next thing that has to be done is these cover rails have to be installed, and the best way to install them is to just put them on there loosely, because you're supposed to set them at 8 inches above the ground. In other words, the distance from the ground to the post is 8 inches. I'm going to go to the center line of the post because it doesn't specify, but it actually says to only hand tighten these. So I'm imagining that's for probably adjustment later when you're putting the cover. All right, so I ran the cable through here and through a hole in my post here. I'll probably cut off the excess post after I'm all done with everything else. So I got the clamp on there. So this one's secure. I haven't secured the back one yet because I might have to fudge with the position on that, because I have to measure the diagonal distance between 2 posts and then measure the other diagonal and make sure the 2 diagonal measurements are identical, and that way I'll know that the thing is square as far as the plane on the ground goes. We want that to be a big rectangle with 4 90-degree angles in the corners. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to sight down these poles, and I'm going to make sure the poles, if they have to move in or out as they go down. And the easy way to do that is I've got a rope or string, and I'm going to have that going along the edge, pull it tight, and then I'm going to just look and see which ones need to be moved in or out. So now I've got my line tight, and I could see, for instance, how much the space is here. So I know this pole needs to go out. If I want to push it out like that and it doesn't want to stay out, well, that's just because probably the next one down is also out. I can actually see, sighting down here, I can see that 1, 2, 3, all 4 of these poles in the inside need to go out. There's a better look at it. Oh, it's straight enough for now. So now that I know that side wall is straight, I can go ahead and anchor this leg too. You know, in the instruction manual, Shelterlogic actually even mentions that these are for temporary use only, and they recommend that you order one of their different anchoring systems. Of course, I'm using that old angle iron, driven into the ground really deep. But I was thinking about how I'd like to keep those side poles in a perfect line now that I've got them all lined up. And the little base plates on there have holes in them, and I think that these will fit through the holes if these pieces weren't on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a grinder and I'm going to grind off this metal auger piece rather than trying to drive these into the ground and hitting rocks and getting all. Not only that, but then I'd have to actually use the loop and tie a cable to each one, and there's only 6 cables that come in the 6 cables and clamps that come in the whole kit. So with these driven in at each interior leg, I think that'll work pretty well. And I actually have some of these left over from the first one that I built a few years ago. I'll probably do the same with that. That was easy. All right, now that I've got all my left-hand legs staked and in position, I also anchored my 4 corners. I double-checked and triple-checked my diagonal dimensions to make sure they match so that I know the frame is square. At least the 4 corner post is square. I still haven't straightened that side yet, but I'll get to that. So I've started hanging the front door panel assembly, and what you have to do is you have to take that strap that's in the center of the panel assembly, you get the white side facing in, put it over the top of the outside, temporarily disconnect this connection right here, loop the strap around as I did here, and then reconnect. Then do the same thing here with this loop right here. So the trick is I gotta get this to wrap around the outside of the pole and kind of stay there while I get the rest of it in position. So the easiest way to do that, if you don't have extra hands, helping hands with you, is just use some of these clamps. These kind of spring clamps. They open wide enough that I should be able to clip onto the pole. So I've wrapped it around the pole and I've clipped it on both sides. And if I didn't already mention it, I've disconnected this post so that I can loop this around it and then reconnect the post, just like I did at the peak. At the bottom, they tie some knots. They basically tie a slip knot like this in at the factory. That's so that this doesn't accidentally get pulled out. If I pull this too much, I'm going to pull it out the other end, and then you're going to have trouble trying to get it back out because it's snaked through this flap. So, this little channel. So we want to pull this to take some of the slack out, but we want to make sure that we don't pull it so much that we pull out the other end. You can see on this side it's very short. So I'm going to pull on each side until it's the slack's taken up and both sides are about the same length. So I'm going to install one of these ratchet mechanisms here, strap mechanisms. So what I want to do is I want to slip this through the slot and then this hook goes right in one of these holes, and I'm going to just cinch it up enough so it doesn't slide out. And you can see that that's trying to slip off again. It's important to be finicky and really make sure that you get this cover on just right. If the ground that you're installing this on is uneven, you may have to settle for some unevenness in the overlap, because the critical thing is to make sure that these zippers operate correctly. Because if you open the zippers and then you go to close them, and when you try and get down near the bottom, if it's really hard to close the zippers, it's because the cover's being stretched too tight at the bottom but not at the top. And what that'll cause is that'll cause your zippers to fail prematurely. The temptation will be to try and use the zipper as a wedging action to try and pull the two pieces together, and that never works out well. All right, that looks pretty good right there. You can still see that crease right there. It's still pulling tight right in that one spot. That's why the zipper operates a little bit more difficult than the other one. What I did is I also moved that leg in a little bit, so I actually closed that opening up a little bit. It's supposed to be 13 feet 2 inches. It's probably closer to 13 foot 1 inch. And that actually takes some of that tension off of the bottom part there. And that's just something that's indicative of the fact that the ground here is not perfectly level. I found the rear panel a lot easier to deal with. I didn't have to worry about tension on the thing, uneven tension on the cover, because there's no zippers to deal with. So I just ran my string along that right hand side and lined up all of those legs in a straight line. It doesn't look straight. It's kind of an optical illusion because of the camera angle, and the fact that those intermediate posts, cross braces, aren't all level, and that's because they're just loose, because the instructions say to keep them loose until you put the big cover on. The next step is to spread the cover out on the ground and unfold it, just like so. If you did it right, the Shelterlogic logo, there should be one in that corner there and one in the far corner there. It looks like I've got the short side of the cover up against the side of the building and the long side of the cover going out that way. And that might be counterintuitive. You might think, well, wait a minute, the shelter is narrower than it is lengthwise. So why wouldn't the cover go the other way? Well, that's because you need all that extra length to go over the arch. There's one other thing. I've got this cover backwards right now. I just unfolded it, and there are two grommets that are installed at the factory on this model that have to do with the installation of the garage door kit. And so I need to have those grommets facing the side with the zippered garage door. So I have to turn this whole thing around. So here's my front end with the zippers. And there are the grommets. So now I know I have it oriented correctly. I could start the process of pulling it over. It goes without saying, if you have more than one ladder and a helper, this ends up being a much easier. So I'm working alone, so I'm going to use these clamps as helping hands. Also, do not attempt this on a windy day. All right, so we're almost done. I got the made sure that the overlap on the front and the back is pretty even, and that side to side it's hanging over the same amount, and then I tightened up the straps in the corners. So these straps actually end up being exposed because they go in the outside hole on the foot if it's available, if you didn't use it for something else like I did. But anyways, and then that's gonna basically wrap this big cover over to overlap your front and your back panels. That's what keeps the weather out. Actually does a pretty good job. Already starting to look pretty good. Really the last step is to go back, and all of these cross braces that were only hand tightened, the reason why we didn't tighten those completely is because we now have to take out every single bolt, and the best way to do this is to do it one at a time. Take one bolt out and the other bolt out, remove that pole, and you actually slide it through this channel right here and then reattach it, and then do that to the next one all the way down. So you should end up with something that looks like this. So now I just have to go down and make sure that everything's level and taut and retighten all of those nuts. So that's it. All I have left to do now really is to back the boat in there and maybe put some lawnmowers or other excess equipment in there for the winter. If you enjoyed this video and found it at all helpful, or in at least the least bit amusing, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button, and please consider subscribing. Take care. all I have left to do now really is to back the boat in there and maybe put some lawnmowers or other excess equipment in there for the winter. If you enjoyed this video and found it at all helpful or at least the least bit amusing, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button, and please consider subscribing. Take care. Now that I've got the shelter all built, I just need to install the door opening kit, which is what's in this box, this 00800. So by design, all of these pipes go together, and you want to start with the pipe that has a plastic cap on the end, and then put together all the pipes. They press together. The ends are actually what they call swaged ends. There are dimples in them, so that when you jam the pipes in there, they'll actually stay together without any screws. And then the idea is you put them all together except for the very last pipe, and then before you put the last pipe on, they recommend you fill this with sand for added weight. Since the zipper door flap on my other Shelterlogic unit of this type is completely ripped, I'm not currently in need of the pole that's in it. So rather than deal with putting those together, and because I don't live at the beach, sand isn't exactly a commodity that I can come by easily. I mean, I literally got to go to the side of the road, shovel it up, and funnel it into there, and just don't want to deal with all that. So I'm just going to use this one since it's already put together and already filled with sand. So all you got to do is insert it in this pocket at the bottom of the door. Right there, there's a little pocket, and it's going to slide right through the length of the door. And I'll tell you right now that, here's my assistant. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Now it's important to note here that there's a notice on the instructions on the cover. It says, important note, in order to install this kit, some cutting of the cover is required. Installation of the kit does not affect or void your warranty. They're basically saying, hey, you know, we're telling you to cut the cover, so don't worry, it's not going to void your warranty. Here's the problem. Here's where they tell you to cut, okay? Do not cut anything. There's no need to. What the company did is they decided to include grommets, holes, ready-made for doing what you need to do in that step. It actually mentions it in the instruction for the shelter. It talks about how when you are installing this door kit that they're going to talk about cutting the cover, and it warns you not to cut the cover. So I just thought I'd mention it. All right, so the kit comes with one really long length of rope. So what I recommend is just tying off each end of the rope through the grommet holes, and then we're gonna do the other steps of wrapping it around here, having it go up through the pulleys I'm gonna put on there, and then seeing how much extra I need, and then just cutting the ropes at the length that I need, so that you're gonna end up probably with a hunk of rope left over, which is going to come in handy down the road because these ropes do fail. All right, so the instructions actually say that you're supposed to hang what they're calling the S-hooks, which are these black plastic pulley things, which, by the way, will also break. You're supposed to actually cut a slit in the door fabric up there to hang that pulley in. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not cutting any slits in no fabric. So I hang my pulleys from that crossbar. And in the past, I just made with a piece of wire, I made a way to just attach it to the cross pole. For some reason, I don't know why, but this kit for the shelter came with 6 of those cables and cable cinches. So I don't know why. I was going to use them in the intermediate areas here. I was going to put one like there, and then on the other side one, so that there'd be 6 points anchored by cable. But instead I'm just going to use them to hang my pulleys. So now I've got the ropes looped under the door. They go up, they go through the pulleys. Oh, by the way, what fails on these pulleys is these little plastic pulleys right there, the white ones. They crack and break with age. They just completely disintegrate. And then they end up tearing up the outer cording on the sheath on the cord here, and it just becomes a mess. So the last step for the door installation really is to attach this plastic cleat. Comes with 2 self-tapping screws to this pole right here. Right about here is a good spot. And it doesn't matter which side you attach it to, whichever side's more convenient for you. And this is where you wrap the 2 ends of the rope around when you're lifting the door. So I can actually cut the ropes now. You could leave the ropes all, one big loop, but there's just so much excess rope that they give you with this thing. It's kind of crazy. I think it actually says that it's like 100 feet of rope. So I cut the 2 ropes to length, and there's that much rope left. I wrapped it all up, so it's kind of hard to tell, but there's probably like 50 feet of rope left, which is good because eventually, like I said, the rope's going to fail and get all frayed, and you're going to want to change the ropes out. All right, so the way this is supposed to work, and sometimes it does, is if we evenly pull on the 2 ropes, it should cause that bottom to roll over itself and start to fold up. And you can see it doesn't really want to do that. It never does. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I didn't cut slits in the top or anything like that. It's just a pathetic and stupid design, quite frankly. That's all I have to say about it.
Saying nothing.
Yeah, well, because it never works. So, what you can do is, if you start it, give it a little roll with your hand. That's good. That's good. Okay. Once you start it, then you can step back and do what the manufacturers of this thing supposedly intended to be able to do. And actually, if you notice, that's not working either. So it's just a pain in the butt. I could move those pulleys apart, spread them out a little bit more. That might help. But it's just not the greatest design. All right, so it looks like I didn't have a wide enough shot. But basically, what's happening here is it's bunching up on itself and not really rolling the way that the engineers of this wonderful design originally intended for it to be able to do. So it just kind of bunches up. That's about as good as it gets. But it's good enough for loading things in and out, I guess. So that's it. All I have left to do now really is to back the boat in there and maybe put some lawnmowers or other excess equipment in there for the winter. If you enjoyed this video and found it at all helpful or at least the least bit amusing, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button, and please consider subscribing. Take care.